Have you ever paused amidst the ceaseless hum of our modern world to contemplate the vast tapestry of time and the countless threads of civilizations that have woven their stories into its fabric, only to fade from view? Consider the sheer immensity of human history, stretching back through millennia, where countless societies have risen, flourished, and ultimately, like desert mirages, dissolved into the annals of the past. These are not mere footnotes, but vibrant, complex worlds teeming with life, ambition, and unique cultures. One might wonder with a sense of profound curiosity how many such kingdoms, such empires, once held dominion over swathes of this earth, their names whispered with reverence or fear, now silent, their borders erased by the relentless march of ages, their legacies often buried beneath the sands or the foundations of newer powers awaiting rediscovery. The map of our world, so familiar in its current configuration, is but a fleeting snapshot in an ever-evolving geopolitical drama. Borders, those seemingly immutable lines drawn across continents, are, in truth, as fluid as rivers, constantly shifting, redrawn by conquest, treaty, or the slow, inexorable pressures of migrating peoples. Empires, like colossal ancient trees, may spread their branches wide, casting long shadows, yet they too are subject to the cycles of growth, decay, and eventual collapse, their mighty trunks toppling to make way for new saplings. Revolutions, like sudden volcanic eruptions, can reshape the landscape of nations overnight, birthing new entities from the ashes of the old, while the slow currents of cultural change and economic fortune can just as surely lead to the quiet fading of once prominent states. In this exploration, we embark on a remarkable journey, a voyage back through the corridors of time to seek out these forgotten nations, these countries that for a period shone brightly on the world stage before their light was extinguished. We shall delve into the heart of ancient empires whose names now conjure images of myth and legend, and we will navigate the more recent, turbulent waters of the 20th century, where political ideologies clashed and redrew the atlas with astonishing speed. This is an odyssey into the fascinating, often poignant world of countries that no longer exist, each with its own unique narrative, its own distinct pulse, its own reasons for vanishing from the contemporary roll call of sovereign states. These are not simply tales of lines on a map, they are profound human stories, chronicles of ambition and ingenuity, of breathtaking glory and heartbreaking downfall. We will encounter tales of immense cultural achievement, of societies that pioneered art, science, and governance, leaving legacies that sometimes endure in subtle, unseen ways. There are stories of betrayal, of internal strife that tore nations apart from within, and of external pressures that proved too great to withstand. Whether you are a dedicated student of history, an avid enthusiast of humanity's complex past, or simply an individual curious about the ever-changing contours of our shared world, this journey into the lost nations of history promises to be an illuminating and captivating experience, revealing the impermanence of power and the enduring echoes of what once was. Deep within the heart of Africa, where the mighty Nile River carves its life-giving path through the arid landscapes of what is now modern-day Sudan, there once flourished a remarkable civilization, a kingdom of immense power and cultural richness known as Kush. For centuries, its story was intertwined with that of its formidable northern neighbor, Egypt, a relationship often defined by rivalry, yet also by profound cultural exchange and mutual influence. The land of Nubia, as this region was anciently called, was blessed with abundant gold, ivory, and ebony, resources that fueled its economy and attracted the attention of empires far and wide. Here, along the fertile banks of the great river, a distinct society took root, destined to leave an indelible mark on the African continent. The early chapters of Kush's existence saw it frequently interacting with the dynastic might of Egypt. At times, Kush found itself under Egyptian dominion, its resources exploited, its people subject to the pharaoh's rule. Yet even in these periods of subjugation, the Nubian spirit remained resilient, absorbing aspects of Egyptian culture while fiercely preserving its own unique identity. Trade routes, ancient arteries of commerce, pulsed between the two realms, carrying not just goods but also ideas, religious beliefs, and artistic motifs. This complex dance of power and exchange would see Kush eventually emerge from Egypt's shadow, not merely as an equal, but for a time as its superior, a testament to its growing strength and ambition. As Kush grew in confidence and autonomy, its cultural expressions began to diverge more distinctly from those of Egypt. While influenced by pharaonic traditions, Kushite art developed its own powerful aesthetic, its pottery renowned for its delicate craftsmanship and unique designs. The rulers of Kush, based first in Kerma, then Napata, and later Meroe, established a sophisticated state, complete with a complex bureaucracy, a powerful military, and a priesthood that commanded immense respect. They even developed their own script, Meroitic, a tantalizing puzzle that, though its alphabet is known, remains largely undeciphered, holding within its elegant symbols the lost voices and stories of this ancient African kingdom, a silent guardian of its innermost secrets. The zenith of Kushite power arrived in the 8th century BCE, a truly astonishing period when its rulers, known as the Black Pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, extended their dominion northwards to conquer and rule over Egypt itself. Figures such as Pia and Taharka, mighty warrior kings from Nubia, sat upon the ancient throne of the pharaohs, ushering in an era of renaissance for a then declining Egypt, restoring temples, upholding traditions, and for a glorious century uniting the lands of the Nile under African leadership. This remarkable chapter in history underscores the dynamism and influence of Kush, a kingdom that rose from the southern lands to command one of the world's oldest and most revered civilizations, a feat of unparalleled historical significance. Long after the Great Pyramids of Giza had become ancient wonders, the rulers of Kush embraced this monumental form of architecture, adapting it to their own distinct cultural landscape. At sites like El Kuru, Nuri, and most famously Meroe, a forest of pyramids rose from the desert sands, smaller and notably steeper than their Egyptian counterparts, yet imbued with a similar profound spiritual significance. These structures were not mere imitations, they were powerful statements of Kushite royal authority, religious devotion, and belief in the afterlife, each one a meticulously constructed eternal home for a deceased monarch, a beacon of their enduring power in the vast expanse of the Nubian desert. These pyramids served as the final resting places for the kings and queens of Kush, their subterranean burial chambers intended to protect their mortal remains and the treasures interred with them for their journey into the next world. Elaborate funerary rituals, blending indigenous Nubian traditions with adopted Egyptian practices, would have accompanied each entombment. The chapels adjoining these pyramids were adorned with reliefs, depicting the deceased ruler in the company of gods, making offerings and asserting their divine right to rule. The sheer number of pyramids at Meroe, over 200, speaks to a long and stable succession of royalty, each generation reaffirming its connection to this sacred tradition of monumental burial, a testament to their enduring civilization. The African pharaohs of the 25th dynasty, who ruled over both Kush and Egypt, were themselves interred in pyramid tombs in Nubia, at El Kuru and Nuri, reinforcing their Kushite origins even as they governed the ancient land of the Nile. Figures like Shabaka, Shabitku, and the formidable Taharka, whose reign was marked by extensive building projects and military campaigns, chose these Nubian necropolises for their eternal rest. Their rule represented a fascinating fusion of cultures, where Nubian strength and piety revitalized Egyptian traditions, leaving an architectural and artistic legacy that bore the hallmarks of both great civilizations, a unique blend of African heritage and pharaonic splendor that commanded the respect of the ancient world. Within these royal tombs, archaeologists have unearthed a wealth of artifacts that offer precious insights into the sophistication and artistic prowess of Kushite society. Exquisite gold jewelry, intricately crafted pottery, fine weaponry, and statues displaying a unique blend of Egyptian and African features all speak to a civilization of great refinement and distinctive character. These treasures, once intended to serve the deceased in the afterlife, now serve as vital clues for historians, helping to piece together the story of this remarkable kingdom, its beliefs, its artistry, and its place as a major power in the ancient African world, a testament to its once vibrant and influential culture. The dominion of the Kushite pharaohs over Egypt, though a period of immense prestige, was ultimately finite. Faced with the rising might of the Assyrian Empire, armed with superior iron weaponry, the Kushite rulers were eventually compelled to retreat southwards, back to their Nubian heartland, around 656 BCE. However, this was not the end of Kush. Instead, the kingdom entered a new, vibrant phase, with its capital shifting further south to Meroe. This Meroitic period, lasting for nearly 1,000 years, witnessed a flourishing of indigenous culture, a distinct artistic style, and the widespread use of the Meroitic script, a testament to Kush's enduring vitality even after its withdrawal from the larger Egyptian stage. Yet, like all great empires, Kush eventually faced the inexorable currents of decline. The precise reasons for its gradual weakening are complex and debated by historians, likely a confluence of factors. Environmental degradation, such as deforestation resulting from the intensive iron smelting industry for which Meroe was famed, may have played a significant role, leading to soil erosion and reduced agricultural productivity. Shifts in lucrative trade routes, particularly the rise of Red Sea commerce which bypassed the Nile Valley, could have severely impacted the kingdom's economic prosperity, undermining the wealth that had sustained its power and influence for so many centuries. The final, decisive blow appears to have been delivered by a neighboring power, the burgeoning kingdom of Aksum, centered in the highlands of modern-day Ethiopia. In the 4th century CE, King Ezana of Aksum, a powerful ruler who had recently converted his kingdom to Christianity, launched a military expedition into Nubia. Inscriptions left by Ezana boast of his conquest of the Meroitic kingdom, the destruction of its towns, and the dispersal of its people. While Meroe may have already been in a state of advanced decline, this Aksumite invasion effectively shattered the remnants of Kushite central authority, leading to its fragmentation and ultimate disappearance as a unified political entity. Though the kingdom of Kush vanished from the political map, its echoes resonate through the ages. The magnificent pyramids of Meroe still stand as silent sentinels in the Sudanese desert, a poignant reminder of its former glory. The undeciphered Meroitic script continues to challenge linguists, holding the promise of revealing deeper insights into this enigmatic civilization. The archaeological remnants scattered along the Nile Valley in Sudan bear witness to a sophisticated African society that for over 2 millennia played a crucial role in the history of the region, a powerful and independent kingdom whose story is an integral part of Africa's rich and diverse heritage, a testament to a forgotten power. When the vast Roman Empire, that colossal power which had once dominated the Mediterranean world, began to fracture and crumble in the West during the 5th century CE, its spirit, its legacy, and indeed its imperial authority did not entirely perish. Instead, it found a new enduring bastion in the East. Here, the Eastern Roman Empire, which we now commonly refer to as the Byzantine Empire, rose to prominence, a direct continuation of Roman traditions, law and administration, destined to outlive its Western counterpart by a remarkable 1,000 years. It stood as a beacon of stability and civilization, in an era often characterized by turmoil and the shifting migrations of peoples across the European continent. At the heart of this resilient empire lay its magnificent capital, Constantinople, a city strategically founded by Emperor Constantine the Great at the ancient Greek site of Byzantium. Poised majestically at the crossroads of 2 continents, Europe and Asia, and controlling the vital waterways connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, Constantinople was more than just a city. It was a nexus of global trade, a fortress of immense strategic importance, and a crucible of cultures. For centuries, its formidable walls, its bustling harbors, and its opulent palaces would stand as symbols of imperial power and unparalleled sophistication, the envy of rulers and merchants from distant lands. The Byzantine Empire meticulously preserved and built upon the rich inheritance of Rome. Roman law, particularly as codified under Emperor Justinian, formed the bedrock of its legal system, influencing jurisprudence for centuries to come. While Latin initially remained the language of administration, Greek, already widely spoken in the Eastern Mediterranean, gradually became the dominant language of culture, scholarship, and the imperial court. Crucially, Christianity, which had become the state religion of the later Roman Empire, found its most fervent champion in Byzantium, with the Orthodox Church shaping the spiritual, cultural, and political identity of the empire and its people, a defining characteristic of its long and storied existence. From its very inception, the Byzantine Empire faced a relentless barrage of external threats and internal challenges. Barbarian tribes, including the Goths, Huns, and Avars, pressed upon its northern frontiers, demanding tribute or seeking territory. To the east, the formidable Sasanian Empire of Persia posed a constant military rival, leading to centuries of protracted and often devastating wars. Internal power struggles, theological disputes that sometimes erupted into civil unrest, and the sheer logistical complexity of governing a vast and diverse territory meant that Byzantine emperors had to be masters of diplomacy, military strategy, and administration merely to survive, let alone thrive in such a precarious world. Among the most illustrious periods in Byzantine history was the reign of Emperor Justinian II in the 6th century. A ruler of boundless energy and ambition, Justinian embarked on ambitious campaigns to reconquer lost Roman territories in the west, temporarily restoring imperial authority over parts of Italy, North Africa, and Spain. His most enduring legacy, however, lies in his comprehensive codification of Roman law, the Corpus Juris Civilis, a monumental work that would profoundly influence legal systems across Europe for generations. Furthermore, his reign witnessed an explosion of architectural grandeur, most famously exemplified by the construction of the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, an engineering marvel that remains a testament to Byzantine ingenuity. The artistic and architectural achievements of the Byzantine Empire represent one of its most breathtaking legacies, characterized by opulent use of gold, intricate mosaics depicting religious scenes and imperial figures with solemn grandeur, and the development of iconic religious art. Byzantine aesthetics exuded a sense of divine majesty and imperial power. Churches like the Hagia Sophia, with its vast dome seemingly floating above the worshippers, and monasteries adorned with vibrant frescoes became centers of spiritual life and artistic innovation. Their engineering prowess was also evident in the construction of massive aqueducts, cisterns, and the legendary Theodosian walls of Constantinople, which repelled numerous sieges for centuries. For much of its existence, the Byzantine Empire was a formidable military power, a crucial bulwark against expansionist forces from the east and north. Its armies were highly organized, well-trained, and adept at adapting their tactics to face diverse enemies. The Byzantine navy, equipped with the terrifying incendiary weapon known as Greek fire, controlled vital sea lanes and defended the empire's extensive coastline. This military strength, combined with astute diplomacy and a sophisticated intelligence network, allowed the empire to endure for a millennium despite being almost constantly at war, preserving a vital link to the classical world through the turbulent medieval period. Beyond its military and political achievements, the Byzantine Empire exerted a profound and lasting cultural and religious influence, particularly throughout Eastern Europe and among the Slavic peoples. Byzantine missionaries, such as Saint Cyril and Methodius, played a pivotal role in the Christianization of these regions, developing the Glagolitic and Cyrillic alphabets to translate religious texts into Slavic languages. This cultural transmission led to the adoption of Orthodox Christianity, Byzantine art, architecture, and political ideologies by emerging states such as Bulgaria, Serbia, and Kievan Rus', shaping the spiritual and cultural landscape of Eastern Europe in ways that resonate to this very day, a testament to its enduring soft power. Despite its resilience, the Byzantine Empire experienced a long and gradual decline, a slow erosion of its territories and strength over several centuries. The rise of the Seljuk Turks in the 11th century led to significant territorial losses in Anatolia, the empire's vital heartland, following the disastrous Battle of Manzikert in 1071. Internal strife, dynastic disputes, and the increasing power of the landed aristocracy further weakened the central authority of the emperors. Perhaps one of the most devastating blows came not from traditional enemies, but from fellow Christians. The Knights of the Fourth Crusade, who in 1204 diverted from their path to the Holy Land and instead shockingly sacked and occupied Constantinople, a betrayal that crippled the empire. Yet even after such catastrophic setbacks, the spirit of Byzantium proved remarkably tenacious. Though fragmented and impoverished by the Crusader occupation, Byzantine successor states emerged, clinging to their Roman heritage and imperial ideals. In 1261, the city of Constantinople was recaptured by Byzantine forces under Michael VIII Palaiologos, and the empire was restored, albeit as a shadow of its former self. For another 2 centuries, this revived empire struggled on, a small state surrounded by powerful enemies, its emperors often reduced to seeking aid from a wary and sometimes hostile Western Europe, a poignant testament to its diminished but unbroken spirit. The final act in the long drama of the Byzantine Empire unfolded in the spring of 1453. The young and ambitious Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, known as the Conqueror, marshaled a vast army and a formidable siege train, including massive cannons, to lay siege to Constantinople. The city, defended by a vastly outnumbered force under the last Byzantine emperor Constantine the Yugoslavia Palaiologos, resisted valiantly for 53 days. The siege was a desperate and heroic struggle, a clash of civilizations that would reverberate throughout the world, marking a pivotal moment in the transition from the medieval to the early modern era, the final stand of a once mighty realm. On May 29, 1453, after a relentless bombardment and fierce fighting, the Ottoman forces breached the ancient Theodosian walls and Constantinople fell. The death of Constantine II and the final assault marked the definitive end of the Roman Empire, an entity that, in its eastern guise, had endured for over 1,100 years after the fall of Rome in the west. The city, once the heart of Eastern Christendom, was transformed into Istanbul, the new capital of the burgeoning Ottoman Empire. Though the Byzantine state ceased to exist, its profound legacy in art, religion, law, and scholarship continued to echo through the centuries, a silent but powerful influence on the world that followed its dramatic demise. High in the Ethiopian highlands, where the air is thin and the vistas stretch to eternity, a remarkable civilization once took root. This was the kingdom of Aksum, a power that would come to dominate the Horn of Africa, its influence stretching far beyond its mountainous heartland. Its origins, shrouded in the mists of antiquity, speak of a fusion of indigenous African peoples and Semitic settlers from across the Red Sea, a potent blend that would lay the foundations for a unique and enduring culture. The very landscape, rugged and challenging, seemed to forge a resilient and ambitious spirit within its inhabitants, compelling them to look outwards towards the vital trade routes that pulsed with the lifeblood of ancient commerce. The strategic genius of Aksum lay in its command of key arteries of trade. Perched advantageously, it overlooked the bustling maritime traffic of the Red Sea, a crucial conduit linking the Roman world with the exotic markets of India and beyond. Inland, its reach extended towards the mighty Nile, tapping into the ancient riverine commerce that had sustained Egypt for millennia. This geographical blessing was not merely incidental. It was the cornerstone upon which Aksum would build its prosperity and its power. A natural fortress and a commercial crossroads rolled into one formidable entity, destined to leave an indelible mark on the annals of history. Before its golden age, Aksum was already a society of considerable complexity. Archaeological whispers tell of sophisticated agricultural practices, harnessing the fertile highland soils to sustain a growing population. Early inscriptions hint at a pantheon of gods, celestial beings worshipped atop sacred mountains, their rituals and beliefs forming the spiritual bedrock of the nascent kingdom. Intricate pottery, finely crafted tools, and the nascent signs of monumental architecture all point to a society rapidly evolving, developing the skills and the organization necessary for the great leap forward that was to come, a testament to their ingenuity and their deep connection to their ancestral lands. Interactions with neighboring realms, such as the declining kingdom of Kush to its north and various smaller principalities, shaped Aksum's early geopolitical landscape. These were not always peaceful encounters. Competition for resources and trade routes inevitably led to skirmishes and alliances, a constant dance of diplomacy and conflict. Yet through these interactions, Aksum absorbed knowledge, adapted technologies, and refined its own distinct identity. It was a crucible of cultures where ideas and influences intermingled, forging a civilization that was both uniquely African and yet cosmopolitan in its outlook, prepared to engage with the wider world on its own terms. As Aksum matured, its capital city, also named Aksum, blossomed into a vibrant metropolis, a bustling emporium where the riches of Africa met the commodities of the Orient and the Mediterranean. Caravans laden with ivory, a prized luxury in Rome, snaked their way from the interior. Gold, gleaming and pure, flowed from distant mines alongside fragrant resins like frankincense and myrrh, essential for religious ceremonies and medicinal practices across the ancient world. In return, Aksum imported fine textiles, glassware, tools and wine. Its markets, a kaleidoscope of languages, cultures and goods, a testament to its central role in the global economy of its time. Perhaps the most transformative event in Aksum's history was its embrace of Christianity in the 4th century CE, under the reign of King Ezana. This momentous decision, making Aksum one of the very first states to officially adopt the new faith, was not merely a spiritual matter, it was a profound political and cultural shift. It aligned Aksum with the burgeoning Christian Roman Empire, fostering diplomatic ties and further integrating it into the Mediterranean world. The new religion took deep root, intertwining with local traditions to create a unique form of Ethiopian Christianity that endures to this day, a spiritual legacy etched into the soul of the nation. The grandeur of Aksum in its heyday is still palpable in the monumental stelae or obelisks that pierce the Ethiopian sky. These colossal stone monoliths, some intricately carved, stand as silent sentinels, markers of royal tombs and symbols of Aksumite power and engineering prowess. Imagine the immense human effort required to quarry, transport and erect these giants, a feat that speaks volumes about the kingdom's organization, resources and the divine authority of its rulers. Palaces, churches and sophisticated irrigation systems further attested to a civilization at the zenith of its creativity and influence, a beacon of architectural and spiritual achievement. A further mark of Aksum's sophistication and its international standing was its minting of its own coinage. These coins, struck in gold, silver and bronze, bore the likenesses of its rulers and Christian symbols, facilitating trade and proclaiming Aksum's sovereignty across its vast commercial network. Finding Aksumite coins in distant lands like India and the eastern Mediterranean underscores the kingdom's far-reaching economic tendrils. It was a clear statement. Aksum was not merely a regional power, but a significant player on the world stage, its currency a recognized standard of value, its name known in the great trading centers of the age. Yet even the mightiest empires are subject to the inexorable forces of change, and Aksum was no exception. A gradual but devastating shift in climate began to undermine the foundations of its prosperity. Prolonged droughts desiccated the once fertile highlands, leading to soil erosion and diminished agricultural yields. The very land that had nurtured Aksum's rise began to betray it, its bounty dwindling, making it increasingly difficult to sustain its population and its complex societal structures. This environmental challenge struck at the heart of the kingdom, weakening it from within, a slow attrition against which even the most resourceful rulers struggled. Compounding these environmental woes was a growing economic isolation. The rise of powerful Islamic caliphates in the 7th century and beyond dramatically reshaped the geopolitical and commercial landscape of the Red Sea region. Trade routes shifted, bypassing Aksumite ports as new powers gained control of the lucrative maritime commerce. The once thriving connections to the Mediterranean world and the East began to fray, starving Aksum of the external trade that had been its lifeblood. Cut off from its traditional markets and sources of wealth, the kingdom found its economic influence waning, its coffers slowly emptying. Internal pressures likely also contributed to Aksum's decline. Succession struggles, regional rebellions, or the strain of maintaining control over a vast and diverse territory may have weakened the central authority. As resources became scarcer and external threats mounted, the delicate balance that held the kingdom together may have begun to unravel. The vibrant cosmopolitan center perhaps found it increasingly difficult to project its power to its peripheries. and the once unshakable loyalty of its subject peoples may have started to waver, creating fissures within the edifice of the state. Though its political power eventually faded, the legacy of Aksum endured, a profound and lasting inheritance. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, born in Aksumite times, became the spiritual and cultural anchor of the Ethiopian highlands for centuries to come, preserving its unique traditions and literary heritage. The magnificent stelae and ruins of ancient Aksum remain powerful reminders of its former glory, inspiring awe and providing a tangible link to a rich past. Indeed, the very identity of modern Ethiopia is deeply intertwined with the memory of Aksum, a foundational chapter in the long and storied history of this ancient land. Upon the stark and often unforgiving shores of the Baltic Sea, a unique entity began to take shape, an entity that would eventually cast a long and formidable shadow across the continent of Europe. This was Prussia, a name that would become synonymous with discipline, militarism, and unwavering ambition. Its genesis lies with the Teutonic Knights, a German crusading order that, in the 13th century, carved out a state for themselves in the lands of the pagan Prussians. This foundational period of conquest and conversion instilled a martial ethos that would become a defining characteristic of the future kingdom, a legacy of iron and will. Through centuries of political maneuvering, dynastic marriages, and sheer tenacity, the territories controlled by the Hohenzollern dynasty, centered around the electorate of Brandenburg, gradually expanded. The pivotal acquisition of the Duchy of Prussia, initially a vassal state of Poland, and its eventual elevation to a kingdom in 1701, marked a crucial turning point. This was not a land blessed with abundant natural resources or easily defensible borders. Its strength would have to be forged through human endeavor, through meticulous organization and an unyielding focus on the instruments of state power, particularly its armed forces. The early architects of Prussian power understood that survival, let alone ascendancy, required a state apparatus of exceptional efficiency and a society imbued with a sense of duty and obedience. Figures like Frederick William, the Great Elector, laid the groundwork, centralizing administration, fostering economic development, and crucially building a standing army that, while modest by some contemporary standards, was highly disciplined and loyal. This was the nascent stage of the Prussian machine, where the cogs of bureaucracy and military preparedness began to mesh with increasing precision, creating a formidable instrument of royal will. The landscape itself, often flat and open, offered little natural protection, compelling Prussia's rulers to rely on a forward defense, a strong military capable of projecting power and deterring potential aggressors. This geographical imperative fostered a culture where the army was not merely one institution among many, but the very backbone of the state. The early development of Prussia was thus a testament to the power of human organization to overcome geographical and material limitations, a relentless drive to transform a scattered collection of territories into a coherent and respected European power. The Prussian military machine, meticulously crafted and relentlessly honed, became the defining feature of the state, leading to the famous adage that Prussia was not a state with an army, but an army with a state. This was no mere hyperbole. The resources of the nation, its societal structure, and its very identity became inextricably linked to the needs and the prestige of its armed forces. Every sinew of Prussian life, from the education of its youth to the conduct of its bureaucracy, was in some way oriented towards supporting and strengthening this formidable military establishment. This transformation was spearheaded by a succession of remarkable, if often austere, rulers. Frederick William I, the soldier king, was almost fanatically devoted to his army, personally drilling his troops and instilling in them an iron discipline. He famously recruited exceptionally tall soldiers for his Potsdam Giants Regiment, a symbol of his obsession with military perfection. His son Frederick II, known as Frederick the Great, inherited this potent instrument and wielded it with strategic genius, expanding Prussian territory and elevating the kingdom to the status of a major European power through audacious campaigns and hard-fought victories. The Silesian Wars against Austria and Prussia's remarkable survival and ultimate success in the 7 Years' War against a coalition of European giants cemented its reputation as a premier military force. Frederick the Great's innovative tactics, the discipline of his soldiers, and the efficiency of the Prussian military administration astonished contemporaries. These conflicts were brutal and costly, but they forged an image of Prussian invincibility and instilled a deep sense of pride and confidence within the kingdom, further reinforcing the centrality of the military in the national consciousness. This martial culture permeated every level of Prussian society. The Junker aristocracy, the landowning elite, traditionally provided the officer corps, viewing military service as a matter of honor and duty. Strict discipline, obedience to authority, and a sense of frugality and service were extolled as virtues. Even the civil administration was run with a military-like precision and efficiency. This all-encompassing militarism, while contributing to Prussia's strength, also sowed the seeds of future conflict, shaping a state that often saw diplomacy as an extension of warfare and military solutions as the most effective means to achieve its aims. In the 19th century, Prussia, under the astute and often ruthless guidance of Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, became the engine of German unification. Through a series of carefully orchestrated wars against Denmark, Austria, and finally France, Bismarck skillfully maneuvered Prussia into a dominant position, ultimately leading to the proclamation of the German Empire in 1871 at the Palace of Versailles. The Prussian king became the German emperor, and the Prussian military and administrative model heavily influenced the structure and character of the newly unified German state. This was Prussia's apotheosis, its long-held ambitions seemingly fulfilled. Within the German Empire, Prussian influence was paramount. Its values of discipline, efficiency, and authoritarianism permeated the political, social, and military fabric of the new nation. While other German states retained some autonomy, Prussia was by far the largest and most powerful, its elites dominating key positions in government and the armed forces. This Prussian stamp on Germany would have profound consequences, contributing to the nation's industrial and military might, but also to an aggressive foreign policy and an internal political culture that often prioritized state power over individual liberties. The cataclysm of World War I and the subsequent collapse of the German Empire marked a significant blow to Prussian prestige, though the state of Prussia continued to exist within the Weimar Republic. However, its traditional influence was curtailed, and its association with German militarism made it a target for reformers. The rise of the Nazi regime saw Prussia's institutions further subverted and co-opted, though the Nazi ideology itself drew upon certain aspects of the Prussian tradition, twisting them for its own horrific ends. The legacy of Prussia became increasingly problematic, viewed by many as a source of the aggressive nationalism that had twice plunged Europe into devastating conflict. Ultimately, it was the aftermath of World War II that sealed Prussia's fate. The Allied Control Council, representing the victorious powers, officially abolished the state of Prussia in 1947. The rationale was clear. Prussia, with its long history of militarism and its perceived role as a carrier of aggressive nationalism, was deemed a threat to future peace and security in Europe. Its territories were divided, its name erased from the political map. Thus, a state that had once dominated Central Europe, that had forged an empire, simply ceased to exist, a deliberate act to exercise what many saw as a dangerous and disruptive historical force. In the turbulent aftermath of the First World War, as empires crumbled and new nations emerged from their ruins, a long-held dream began to take shape in the Balkans, the creation of a unified state for the South Slavic peoples. This aspiration, fueled by shared linguistic roots and a desire for self-determination, led to the formation of the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes in 1918. It was a bold experiment, bringing together diverse ethnic groups with distinct histories, religions, and cultural traditions, all under a single royal banner, hoping to forge a common destiny from a fragmented past. The interwar period for this fledgling kingdom, later renamed Yugoslavia, Land of the South Slavs, in 1929, was fraught with challenges. Deep-seated ethnic rivalries, particularly between Serbs and Croats, simmered beneath the surface, often erupting into political crises. The centralized, Serb-dominated government struggled to accommodate the aspirations of other groups for greater autonomy, leading to persistent instability. The promise of unity proved elusive, as historical grievances and competing national narratives constantly threatened to tear the fragile union apart, a delicate balancing act on a political high wire. The cataclysm of the Second World War brought unimaginable devastation to Yugoslavia. Invaded and brutally partitioned by the Axis powers in 1941, the country became a maelstrom of horrific violence. Multiple resistance movements emerged, most notably the communist-led partisans under Josip Broz Tito and the royalist Chetniks. These groups fought not only the occupiers but also each other in a bitter civil war, further deepening the ethnic fault lines. The war years were a crucible of suffering and heroism, a period that would profoundly shape the post-war landscape and the memories of its peoples. From the ashes of this devastating conflict, a new Yugoslavia emerged, under the charismatic and iron-willed leadership of Tito. In 1945, the monarchy was abolished and the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was proclaimed. This new state was designed as a federation of 6 republics: Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, and Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Macedonia, each theoretically representing a distinct national group bound together by a socialist ideology and the powerful personality of its leader. It was an attempt to rebuild not just a country but a shared identity on the ruins of war and division.
Check, check. Check 1, check 2, check, check.
For several decades, Josip Broz Tito managed to hold Yugoslavia together, a feat of extraordinary political skill. He cultivated a personality cult and promoted the doctrine of brotherhood and unity, bratstvo I jedinstvo, an official ideology aimed at suppressing nationalist sentiments and fostering a common Yugoslav identity. Under his firm hand, open expressions of ethnic chauvinism were largely kept in check, and a semblance of inter-ethnic harmony was maintained, at least on the surface. His leadership provided a powerful centripetal force, binding the disparate republics into a cohesive, albeit tightly controlled, whole. Yugoslavia carved out a unique and influential position on the world stage during the Cold War. Breaking with Stalin's Soviet Union in 1948, Tito steered his country on an independent socialist path, becoming a key founder and leader of the non-aligned movement. This policy of neutrality between the Eastern and Western blocs brought Yugoslavia considerable international prestige and allowed it to receive aid and maintain economic ties with both sides. It was a delicate balancing act, skillfully managed by Tito, that enhanced the country's sense of sovereignty and distinctiveness in a deeply polarized world. Internally, Yugoslavia experimented with a unique economic system known as socialist self-management, where workers theoretically had a greater say in the running of their enterprises. For a time, this system, combined with Western loans and remittances from Yugoslavs working abroad, delivered a relatively high standard of living compared to other Eastern European communist states. Citizens enjoyed greater freedom to travel, and a degree of cultural openness was permitted, contributing to a sense of Yugoslav exceptionalism. However, this economic model also had inherent inefficiencies and contributed to growing regional disparities. Despite the official rhetoric of unity and the apparent stability of Tito's rule, the underlying ethnic, religious, and historical grievances never truly disappeared. They were merely suppressed, simmering beneath a carefully constructed facade. Memories of wartime atrocities, economic inequalities between the more prosperous northern republics and the poorer south, and the constant struggle for greater republican autonomy versus central control created persistent, albeit often unspoken, tensions. These dormant fault lines, held in check by Tito's authority, would prove to be dangerously potent once that authority was gone. The death of Tito in 1980 created a power vacuum that the complex system of rotating leadership, designed to prevent any single republic or ethnic group from dominating, could not effectively fill. Without his unifying presence, the centrifugal forces of nationalism began to gather strength. Economic decline in the 1980s exacerbated these tensions as republics bickered over diminishing federal resources and blamed each other for their woes. Ambitious nationalist politicians rose to prominence in several republics, skillfully exploiting historical grievances and ethnic anxieties to mobilize popular support. The late 1980s and early 1990s witnessed a rapid escalation of these nationalist sentiments. Slovenia and Croatia, the wealthiest republics, began to push for greater autonomy and eventually independence, chafing under what they perceived as Serbian dominance within the federation. Their declarations of independence in 1991 triggered a chain reaction. The Yugoslav People's Army, largely controlled by Serbs, intervened to prevent their secession, leading to brief but intense conflicts. These initial wars were a grim harbinger of the far greater horrors that were to follow as the very fabric of the nation began to tear apart. The most brutal and prolonged conflict erupted in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a multi-ethnic republic with significant Serb, Croat and Bosniak Muslim populations. As Bosnia declared independence, it descended into a savage war characterized by widespread ethnic cleansing, mass killings, concentration camps, and the prolonged siege of cities like Sarajevo. The Yugoslav wars, encompassing conflicts in Croatia, Bosnia, and later Kosovo, shocked the world with their ferocity and the scale of human suffering, a grim reminder of how quickly simmering ethnic hatreds could explode into unimaginable violence. By the end of the 1990s, the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia had ceased to exist. In its place stood a collection of newly independent states, their borders often drawn along ethnic lines, their populations scarred by years of war and mutual distrust. Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia, then Macedonia, Montenegro and Serbia, which initially formed a rump Yugoslavia with Montenegro, emerged as sovereign nations. Later, Kosovo would also declare independence from Serbia, a move still only partially recognized internationally. The dream of a unified South Slav state had ended in a tragic nightmare, leaving a legacy of division and bitter memories. Here, in the heart of a Europe irrevocably altered by the Great War, new aspirations for nationhood began to stir. The colossal Austro-Hungarian Empire, a mosaic of peoples and cultures, had crumbled, its vast territories now fertile ground for the seeds of self-determination. Among those yearning for their own sovereign voice were the Czechs and the Slovaks, two closely related Slavic peoples. Their destinies intertwined by centuries of shared history, yet distinct in their cultural nuances. The echoes of imperial rule were fading, replaced by a fervent desire to carve out a future on their own terms. A democratic haven amidst the shifting political sands of a continent reborn from conflict and ready to embrace a new, more equitable order. The Czechs, with their rich Bohemian heritage and a strong industrial base, and the Slovaks, rooted in a more agrarian tradition and the rugged landscapes of the Tatra Mountains, found common cause. Their languages, though distinct, shared a remarkable intelligibility, fostering a sense of brotherhood. For generations they had lived under the dominion of others, their cultural identities sometimes suppressed, sometimes tolerated, but rarely allowed full, unfettered expression on the grand stage of European politics. Now, with the old order dismantled, the dream of a unified state, a Czechoslovak entity, began to take tangible form, propelled by intellectuals, patriots, and the unyielding spirit of peoples long denied their rightful place among the sovereign nations of the world, envisioning a shared future. The path to this new beginning was championed by visionary leaders, most notably Tomas Garrigue Masaryk, a philosopher and statesman whose intellectual prowess and unwavering commitment to democratic ideals resonated far beyond the borders of his homeland. He, along with figures like Milan Rastislav Stefanik and Edvard Beneš, tirelessly campaigned on the international stage, seeking recognition and support from the victorious Allied powers. Their arguments for a unified state, highlighting the cultural kinship and strategic viability of such a nation, found sympathetic ears, particularly with Woodrow Wilson and his principles of national self-determination. This diplomatic ballet, played out against the backdrop of post-war negotiations, was crucial in laying the institutional groundwork for the nascent state. And so, in the autumn of 1918, as the final vestiges of the old empire dissolved, the first Czechoslovak Republic was proclaimed. It emerged as a beacon of democratic stability in Central Europe, a testament to the resilience and aspirations of its people. With a constitution that enshrined liberal values, a thriving industrial sector and a vibrant cultural scene, Czechoslovakia represented a bold experiment in nation-building. For a brief, hopeful period, it seemed that this carefully constructed union, born from the ashes of imperial collapse and the fervent desire for self-rule, would endure as a model of harmonious coexistence and progressive governance in a region often characterized by division and strife. The interwar years for Czechoslovakia were a period of remarkable flourishing, a golden age where art, science and industry thrived under the umbrella of a robust democratic framework. Its cities, Prague and Bratislava, buzzed with intellectual ferment and economic dynamism. Yet, this prosperity was not without its undercurrents of complexity. The new nation was a tapestry woven from diverse ethnic threads, not only Czechs and Slovaks, but also significant populations of Germans in the Sudetenland, Hungarians in the south, and Rusins in the east. Managing these diverse identities and aspirations within a unified state presented an ongoing challenge, a delicate balancing act for the young republic striving to forge a cohesive national identity from its multifaceted populace. But darker clouds were gathering on the European horizon. The rise of Nazism in neighboring Germany cast a long, ominous shadow over Czechoslovakia's hard-won sovereignty. The fateful Munich Agreement of 1938, a desperate act of appeasement by Britain and France, saw the Sudetenland, an integral part of the nation, ceded to Hitler's demands, a betrayal that left the country dismembered and defenseless. This was swiftly followed by the full Nazi occupation of the Czech lands, transforming Bohemia and Moravia into a protectorate, while Slovakia was carved off as a nominally independent yet subservient puppet state. The democratic dream, so vibrantly alive just years before, was brutally extinguished under the jackboot of totalitarian aggression. With the cataclysm of the Second World War drawing to a close, Czechoslovakia was resurrected, its pre-Munich borders largely restored, a nation eager to reclaim its democratic heritage. However, the geopolitical landscape of post-war Europe was starkly redrawn. The Iron Curtain began its descent, and Czechoslovakia, despite its Western inclinations, found itself inexorably drawn into the Soviet sphere of influence. The coup d'état of 1948 cemented Communist Party rule, transforming the nation into a one-party state, its freedoms curtailed, its economy reshaped along socialist lines, and its foreign policy dictated by Moscow. The aspirations for true independence once again faced a formidable, chilling adversary from the East. Yet the spirit of liberty, though suppressed, was not entirely extinguished. In 1968, a period of reform known as the Prague Spring blossomed, led by Alexander Dubček, who sought to create socialism with a human face. For a few precious months, censorship eased, political debate flourished, and hopes for a more open society soared. But this fragile dawn was brutally crushed in August as Soviet tanks and Warsaw Pact forces rolled into the country, reasserting Moscow's iron grip. This invasion sent a chilling message across the Eastern Bloc, yet it also sowed seeds of dissent and resilience that would 2 decades later contribute to the eventual unraveling of communist control, a testament to the enduring human desire for freedom. The year 1989 witnessed a seismic shift across Central and Eastern Europe, as the edifice of Soviet-backed communism began to crumble with astonishing speed. In Czechoslovakia, this transformation took the form of the Velvet Revolution, a remarkably peaceful uprising characterized by mass demonstrations, general strikes, and an unwavering demand for an end to one-party rule. Led by dissidents and intellectuals, foremost among them the playwright Václav Havel, who would soon become president, the movement swept away the old regime with a gentle yet irresistible force. The chains of decades were broken, not with violence but with the resounding chorus of voices yearning for democracy, freedom of expression, and national sovereignty. With the restoration of democracy, however, came the re-emergence of distinct national aspirations within the federation. While united in their opposition to communism, Czechs and Slovaks increasingly began to articulate differing visions for their political and economic futures. Discussions about the nature of the federal state, the distribution of powers, and the pace of economic reform revealed growing divergences. Nationalist sentiments, long dormant or suppressed under the homogenizing force of communist rule, found new voice in the open political arena. For some Slovaks, the desire for full statehood, for a distinct Slovak star on the European flag, became a powerful political current, challenging the existing federal structure. The leaders of the Czech and Slovak regions, most notably Václav Klaus and Vladimir Mečiar, embarked on a series of intense negotiations to determine the future of their shared state. Unlike many national separations in history, which are often marred by conflict and bitterness, the discussions surrounding Czechoslovakia's potential dissolution were characterized by a remarkable pragmatism and a commitment to a peaceful outcome. There were no calls to arms, no outbreaks of violence, no mass displacements of populations. Instead, political leaders, recognizing the legitimacy of differing national aspirations, meticulously worked through the complex legal, economic and administrative details of a potential separation, prioritizing stability and mutual respect. And so, on the first day of January 1993, Czechoslovakia ceased to exist, peacefully dissolving into two independent nations, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. This velvet divorce, as it became known, stands as a rare and commendable example of a nation dividing by mutual consent, without bloodshed or acrimony. The two new republics embarked on their separate paths, maintaining close economic and cultural ties, demonstrating to the world that national self-determination can indeed be achieved through dialogue and peaceful negotiation. The legacy of Czechoslovakia, therefore, is not one of failure, but of a mature and civilized parting of ways, a unique chapter in the often turbulent narrative of European nation-states. High upon the vast, windswept expanse known as the rooftop of the world lies the Tibetan Plateau. This immense elevated landmass, averaging over 4,500 meters above sea level, is a realm of breathtaking, stark beauty, surrounded by the planet's most formidable mountain ranges, including the mighty Himalayas. For millennia, this geographical isolation has been a defining feature of Tibet, profoundly shaping its unique culture, its spiritual traditions, and its distinct historical trajectory. The thin air, the harsh climate, and the rugged terrain have forged a resilient people deeply connected to their environment and to the ancient wisdom passed down through generations, a civilization seemingly suspended between earth and sky. Within this secluded sanctuary, a long and rich history of distinct governance unfolded, often intertwined with its unique form of Buddhism. The institution of the Dalai Lamas, spiritual leaders who also at various times held significant temporal power, became central to Tibetan identity. This theocratic system, where religious authority and political rule were deeply interwoven, created a society unlike any other, one where monasteries were not only centers of learning and spiritual practice, but also significant administrative and economic hubs. The intricate tapestry of Tibetan Buddhism, with its profound philosophical teachings and vibrant ritualistic traditions, permeated every aspect of life, shaping art, medicine, social customs, and the very worldview of its people. The early 20th century brought momentous change to the wider region. In 1912, the Qing dynasty of China, which had long claimed a degree of suzerainty over Tibet, collapsed, ushering in a period of internal turmoil and fragmentation within China itself. This imperial implosion created a significant power vacuum across its former territories, and for Tibet it presented a critical window of opportunity. The 13th Dalai Lama, Thubten Gyatso, seized this moment to formally reassert Tibet's independence, expelling Qing officials and troops, and declaring Tibet a sovereign nation, free from external dominion. This was a bold declaration, aimed at securing Tibet's place among the independent nations of the world. During the subsequent decades, from roughly 1912 until the late 1940s, Tibet functioned as a de facto independent state. It maintained its own government, its own currency, its own postal system, and its own small army. While formal international recognition was limited, largely due to the complex geopolitics of the era and British India's strategic interests, Tibet managed its internal affairs without direct interference from China. This period saw efforts to modernize certain aspects of the Tibetan administration and military, albeit cautiously, as the nation sought to navigate its path in a rapidly changing world, all while preserving its ancient traditions and unique way of life, a fragile autonomy on the high plateau. The mid-20th century witnessed a profound geopolitical shift with the triumph of the Communist Party in the Chinese Civil War and the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949 under Mao Zedong. The new revolutionary government in Beijing swiftly turned its attention to consolidating control over territories it considered integral parts of China. And Tibet, with its vast landmass and strategic location, featured prominently in these ambitions. The official Chinese narrative framed Tibet as a feudal society awaiting liberation, a region that had historically been part of the Chinese motherland and whose people needed to be brought into the fold of the new socialist order, a perspective starkly different from Tibetan claims of historical independence. In October 1950, the People's Liberation Army crossed into eastern Tibet, overwhelming the small, poorly equipped Tibetan forces. This military action, termed a peaceful liberation by Beijing but an invasion by many Tibetans and international observers, marked a decisive turning point in Tibet's history. Faced with overwhelming military superiority, the Tibetan government, under the young 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, was compelled to negotiate. In May 1951, Tibetan delegates, under duress, signed the 17-point agreement for the peaceful liberation of Tibet, an accord that recognized Chinese sovereignty while ostensibly guaranteeing Tibet's existing political system and religious freedoms, a compromise born of necessity. However, the relationship between the Chinese authorities and the Tibetan populace grew increasingly fraught. Policies aimed at social and economic reform, land redistribution, and the integration of Tibet into the PRC often clashed with traditional Tibetan customs, religious practices, and societal structures. Resentment simmered, fueled by concerns over the erosion of Tibetan autonomy and the perceived suppression of their cultural identity. This tension culminated in March 1959 with a large-scale uprising in Lhasa against Chinese rule. The rebellion was brutally suppressed by the PLA, resulting in significant loss of life and widespread destruction, a tragic chapter in Tibet's modern story. The failure of the 1959 uprising had profound and lasting consequences. The 14th Dalai Lama, fearing for his life and the future of his people, made a perilous journey across the Himalayas, seeking refuge in India, where he was granted asylum. He was followed by tens of thousands of Tibetan refugees, carrying with them the seeds of their culture and an unyielding hope for return. In Tibet itself, the subsequent decades under direct Chinese administration brought immense societal upheaval, including the Cultural Revolution's devastating impact on monasteries and religious artifacts, and ongoing efforts to reshape Tibetan society in line with Beijing's political and developmental objectives, forever altering the ancient land. The status of Tibet remains one of the most enduring and contentious issues in contemporary international relations. The People's Republic of China firmly maintains that Tibet is an inalienable part of its territory, highlighting significant investments in infrastructure, education, and economic development that it argues have improved the lives of Tibetans and brought progress to a previously underdeveloped region. Beijing dismisses claims of cultural suppression as baseless, pointing to the protection of certain cultural sites and the official recognition of Tibetan language and customs within the framework of its ethnic minority policies. This narrative emphasizes unity and modernization under central government guidance. Conversely, the Tibetan government in exile, based in Dharamshala, India, along with numerous international human rights organizations and supporters worldwide, paints a starkly different picture. They speak of systematic human rights abuses, the suppression of religious freedom, the erosion of Tibetan language and culture through assimilationist policies, and the environmental degradation of the fragile Tibetan plateau. The Dalai Lama, a globally respected figure and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, has for decades advocated a middle-way approach, seeking genuine autonomy for Tibet within the PRC rather than full independence, a proposal consistently rejected by Beijing, which views it as a covert attempt at separatism. The preservation of Tibetan culture and religion has become a critical mission for the diaspora community. In exile, monasteries have been re-established, traditional arts and sciences are taught, and a vibrant democratic system for the Tibetan government in exile has been cultivated. These efforts represent a determined attempt to keep the flame of Tibetan identity alive, ensuring that its unique spiritual heritage and ancient wisdom are not extinguished by political circumstance. Within Tibet itself, despite significant restrictions and surveillance, many Tibetans quietly strive to maintain their cultural practices and religious faith, often at considerable personal risk, a testament to the resilience of their ancestral traditions. The Tibet question thus remains a complex tapestry of historical claims, cultural survival, geopolitical strategy, and human rights concerns. For many nations, balancing economic ties with China against concerns for Tibetan self-determination presents a delicate diplomatic challenge. The future of Tibet and the fate of its unique civilization hangs in the balance, a poignant reminder of how the destinies of ancient lands and peoples can be profoundly reshaped by the grand, often unforgiving, currents of modern history. The land above the clouds continues to be a subject of profound debate and deep emotional resonance across the globe. Here in the heart of Europe, after the cataclysm of global conflict, a new kind of boundary was etched upon the land. Not a natural frontier of mountain or river, but an ideological chasm, a stark line drawn by the victors of a devastating war. The German Democratic Republic, or East Germany as it became known to the world, emerged from the Soviet occupation zone, a fledgling state born into a continent cleaved in two. Its very existence was a testament to the profound geopolitical shifts that rippled outwards from the embers of the Second World War, reshaping alliances and forging new, often uneasy destinies for millions. This was a landscape where the future was being actively and often painfully rewritten by human hands. The architects of this new order envisioned distinct paths for the fractured remnants of a once unified nation. To the west, a democratic republic, aligned with the burgeoning Atlantic powers, began its recovery under a different banner, a different philosophy, but here, in the east, the Soviet Union exerted its powerful influence, fostering a socialist state modeled in its own image. The establishment of the GDR in 1949 was not merely a political maneuver, it was the solidification of a division that would define European affairs for decades, a physical manifestation of the Iron Curtain that descended across the continent, separating families, ideologies, and ways of life with an almost geological finality. The early years were a period of immense upheaval and reconstruction, but also of tightening control. The promise of a workers' paradise, a society built on equality and collective endeavor, resonated with some, yet for others, the reality was one of increasing restriction. The state's apparatus grew, its reach extending into almost every facet of daily existence, from the factory floor to the classroom, from the newsstands to the privacy of one's home. This nascent nation, forged in the crucible of post-war tension, was embarking on a unique and often isolating journey, its course charted by forces far beyond the control of many of its inhabitants. And so East Germany took its place on the world stage, a nation born of division, its identity intrinsically linked to the larger Cold War narrative. It was a grand and often tragic experiment in societal engineering, a place where the aspirations of a political doctrine collided with the complexities of human experience. The very soil seemed to carry the weight of this ideological contest, a silent witness to the profound and lasting impact of human conflict and the subsequent redrawing of the maps that define our world, a process as relentless and transformative as any force in the natural kingdom, shaping the human landscape for generations to come. For nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall stood as the most potent symbol of this division, a brutalist scar across a historic city. It was more than a mere concrete and barbed wire. It was a physical barrier that sought to stem the flow of people, of ideas, of hope. Life in its shadow was a unique and often paradoxical experience. The state, omnipresent and watchful, was personified by the Ministry for State Security, the Stasi, whose network of informants permeated society, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and unease. Yet, within these confines, ordinary life in all its resilience persisted, adapting to the unyielding pressures of its environment. The economy of East Germany, centrally planned and closely tied to the Soviet bloc, presented a stark contrast to the burgeoning consumerism of the West. Shortages were common, and the coveted products of Western capitalism were often glimpsed only through the flickering images of West German television, broadcasts that, despite official disapproval, found their way into many East German homes. Yet there was also a degree of social security, guaranteed employment and affordable housing, aspects of life that some would later recall with a degree of nostalgia, a testament to the complex tapestry of human memory and experience when filtered through the lens of profound change. Culture, too, found its own unique expression, sometimes in service to the state, sometimes in subtle acts of defiance. Music, literature and film navigated the narrow channels of official approval, yet artists often found ingenious ways to explore themes of longing, identity and the human condition, even within a restrictive framework. The desire for self-expression, that fundamental human trait, could not be entirely suppressed by ideological conformity. It sought out the cracks, the fissures, the quiet spaces where it could breathe, a reminder that the human spirit, much like life in the most challenging environments, finds a way to endure and even flourish in unexpected forms. The Berlin Wall, then, was not just a barrier separating East from West, but also a membrane through which the complexities of human existence were filtered. It created a distinct societal ecosystem with its own rules, its own rhythms, and its own unique forms of adaptation. The longing for connection, for freedom, for a life beyond the confines of the state, simmered beneath the surface, a potent force awaiting its moment, a pressure building steadily, inevitably, towards a point of dramatic release, a transformation that would once again redraw the map of this contested land. The late 1980s witnessed a groundswell of change across Eastern Europe, a stirring of peoples long dormant under the weight of authoritarian rule. In East Germany, peaceful protests, initially small and tentative, began to gather momentum, fueled by a yearning for reform and freedom. The iconic call of "Wir sind das Volk," "We are the people," echoed through the streets of Leipzig and other cities, a powerful assertion of collective will against a state apparatus that was beginning to show signs of fracture. It was a remarkable display of courage, a testament to the enduring power of ordinary individuals to shape their own destiny when united by a common purpose. The pivotal moment, etched forever in the annals of history, arrived on the 9th of November 1989. A somewhat bewildered government announcement, misinterpreted and rapidly disseminated, declared that East Germans were free to cross the borders. What followed was an outpouring of human emotion rarely witnessed on such a scale. Thousands flocked to the Berlin Wall, that grim sentinel of division, and in scenes of jubilation and disbelief, began to dismantle it piece by piece. The barrier that had seemed so permanent, so insurmountable, crumbled in a matter of hours. Swept away by a tide of human aspiration, the fall of the Berlin Wall did not immediately signify the end of East Germany as a state, but it irrevocably sealed its fate. The political and economic pressures for reunification became overwhelming. Negotiations between the two Germanys and with the four Allied powers who still held formal responsibilities proceeded at a rapid pace. The desire for unity, suppressed for over 4 decades, now asserted itself with an undeniable urgency. The intricate machinery of two distinct states with their differing laws, economies and social structures had to be carefully yet swiftly interwoven into a single entity, a monumental undertaking. And so on the 3rd of October 1990, less than a year after the wall fell, East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, officially ceased to exist, its territory and its people absorbed into the Federal Republic of Germany. A nation born from the ashes of war and ideological schism had completed its relatively brief yet profoundly impactful journey. The scar on the European landscape began to heal, Though the memories, the experiences and the legacy of those 41 years would continue to shape the identity of a reunified Germany, a powerful reminder that the political contours of our world are not fixed, but are constantly being reshaped by the relentless currents of history and human endeavor. In the humid, fertile lands of Southeast Asia, another nation emerged from the crucible of colonial withdrawal and ideological strife, South Vietnam. Its formal existence as the Republic of Vietnam was a direct consequence of the mid-20th century's turbulent power shifts. Following the departure of French colonial forces after the First Indochina War, the Geneva Accords of 1954 carved the Vietnamese territory in two along the 17th parallel. This division, intended to be temporary pending nationwide elections, instead solidified into a stark political boundary, a fault line in the burgeoning Cold War that would soon erupt with devastating consequences for its people. The Northern Territory, under the charismatic leadership of Ho Chi Minh, embraced communism, aligning itself with the Soviet Union and China. In the south, a fragile anti-communist state was established, heavily reliant on the support of the United States, which viewed Vietnam as a critical domino in the global struggle against communist expansion. The promised elections to unify the country never materialized, as mutual suspicion and irreconcilable ideologies deepened the chasm between North and South. Thus, South Vietnam embarked on its precarious journey, a nation born into a world already polarized, its destiny inextricably linked to the geopolitical ambitions of distant superpowers. The early years of South Vietnam were marked by political instability and internal conflict. Various factions vied for power, and the government, led by Ngo Dinh Diem, faced significant opposition, not only from communist insurgents, the Viet Cong, who were actively supported by the North, but also from within its own populace. The dream of a stable, independent and prosperous southern state proved elusive, constantly undermined by internal divisions and the escalating guerrilla warfare that began to bleed across the countryside. The very fabric of society was being stretched to its limits, even before the full might of external forces was brought to bear upon this troubled land. This division, therefore, was more than just a line on a map. It represented a profound rift in national identity, a tearing apart of a people with a shared history and culture. The 17th parallel became a symbol of an unfinished chapter, a wound that refused to heal. South Vietnam, from its very inception, was a state defined by this separation, its existence a continuous struggle for legitimacy and survival against a determined and ideologically driven adversary to its north. The seeds of a much larger and far more brutal conflict had been sown, and the world watched as this small corner of Indochina became a focal point of global tension. The conflict that would come to define South Vietnam's existence, and indeed etch itself into the global consciousness as the Vietnam War, began as a low-intensity insurgency, but rapidly escalated. The United States, fearing the domino effect in Southeast Asia, steadily increased its military involvement, transforming a regional struggle into a full-blown international confrontation. American advisors soon gave way to combat troops, and the skies above South Vietnam became filled with the thunder of B-52 bombers and the whir of helicopter gunships. The landscape itself, once serene, became a battleground scarred by napalm and Agent Orange, its villages caught in the crossfire. Life for the ordinary citizens of South Vietnam became a daily struggle for survival amidst the chaos and violence. The war permeated every aspect of society, disrupting ancient rhythms of life, forcing millions to flee their ancestral homes and creating a generation that knew little else but conflict. The cities, like Saigon, swelled with refugees, and a fragile economy, heavily dependent on American aid, struggled to cope with the immense pressures. Political stability remained elusive, with a succession of military coups and fragile civilian governments attempting to navigate the treacherous currents of war and internal dissent, often with limited success against a backdrop of unrelenting hostility. The Tet Offensive in 1968, a coordinated series of attacks by North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces across South Vietnam, marked a critical turning point. While a military defeat for the attackers, its psychological impact, particularly in the United States, was profound. It shattered the illusion of an imminent victory and fueled growing anti-war sentiment. For South Vietnam, it demonstrated the tenacity and reach of its adversaries and underscored the immense challenge of securing a lasting peace or a decisive military outcome, even with the backing of the world's most powerful military force, showing the limits of external intervention in a deeply rooted civil conflict. The war years were a period of immense suffering and sacrifice for the people of South Vietnam. Families were torn apart, communities were destroyed, and the very soul of the nation was tested in the crucible of relentless warfare. The dream of an independent, peaceful South Vietnam seemed to recede further with each passing year as the conflict dragged on, consuming lives and resources with an insatiable appetite. This nation, forged in division, was now being systematically dismantled by the very war that was ostensibly being fought to preserve it, a tragic paradox played out on a devastating human scale. As the 1970s dawned, the political landscape surrounding the Vietnam War began to shift dramatically. In the United States, public opposition to the war reached a crescendo, and the policy of Vietnamization gradually transferring combat responsibilities to South Vietnamese forces, while American troops withdrew, gained momentum. The Paris Peace Accords, signed in January 1973, officially marked the end of direct American military involvement, though the fragile ceasefire it established was destined to be short-lived. For South Vietnam, the departure of its most powerful ally signaled an ominous new chapter, a future where it would largely stand alone. Without the massive air power and logistical support of the United States, the South Vietnamese military, despite its numbers and equipment, found itself increasingly vulnerable. The North Vietnamese, biding their time and rebuilding their strength, saw an opportunity. In early 1975, they launched a final, decisive offensive. What followed was a rapid collapse of South Vietnamese defenses. Province after province fell, often with surprising speed, as morale crumbled, and the cohesive fighting spirit so crucial in any conflict began to evaporate in the face of the relentless advance from the north. The final act of this long and tragic drama unfolded in April 1975. The iconic images of desperate civilians attempting to flee Saigon, of American helicopters evacuating personnel from the embassy rooftop, became enduring symbols of the war's end and South Vietnam's demise. On April 30th, North Vietnamese tanks crashed through the gates of the presidential palace in Saigon, effectively ending the existence of the Republic of Vietnam. The war was over, and the country, divided for more than 2 decades, was on the cusp of reunification under communist rule, a profound transformation for the entire region. And so, South Vietnam, a nation born of Cold War divisions and sustained through years of brutal conflict, vanished from the world map. Its brief, turbulent history serves as a stark reminder of the devastating human cost of ideological struggles and the profound impact of geopolitical power plays on the destinies of smaller nations. The unification of Vietnam marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, but the legacy of the war and the memory of the nation that was South Vietnam continues to resonate, a poignant echo from a not-too-distant past, reminding us of the fragility of states and the enduring scars left by conflict. The tapestry of our world, so often perceived as fixed and immutable, is in truth a dynamic and ever-changing canvas. The borders we trace on maps, the nations they delineate, are but fleeting expressions of human organization, subject to the relentless currents of political upheaval, cultural evolution, and the ceaseless quest for identity and self-determination. The stories of Kush, Byzantium, Prussia, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and South Vietnam are not mere historical footnotes. They are vibrant echoes from the past, powerful reminders that the political geography of today is merely a snapshot in the long, unfolding narrative of human civilization, a single frame in an epic motion picture. Consider the vastness of time, the rise and fall of empires that once seemed eternal, the shifting sands upon which civilizations have built their grand designs. Each nation we have explored in its own unique way, held sway, shaped destinies, and left an indelible mark upon the human story before succumbing to the forces of change, invasion, internal strife, ideological collapse, or peaceful dissolution. Their disappearance is not an ending, but a transformation, their legacies absorbed into the nations that followed, their cultural DNA woven into the fabric of the present, influencing the world we inhabit in ways often unseen yet profoundly felt. The world map you see today, with its familiar contours and established states, is itself a work in progress. 100 years from now, perhaps even sooner, it could look dramatically different. New nations emerging, old alliances shifting, the very concept of sovereignty potentially redefined by challenges and opportunities we can scarcely imagine. The forces that shaped the forgotten nations of history, ambition, conflict, cooperation, technological advancement, and the simple, irrepressible human desire for a better future are still very much at play, constantly reshaping our global landscape with an almost geological persistence. As we reflect on these departed realms, let us remember that history is not a static collection of dates and events, but a living, breathing process. The stories of these lost countries offer profound lessons about resilience, the complexities of power, and the enduring quest for identity. They urge us to look beyond the immediate, to understand the deeper currents that shape our world. Which of these national sagas resonated most deeply with your understanding of our shared past? The echoes of their existence are all around us, if only we choose to listen, and in listening, perhaps we can better navigate the currents of our own unfolding times. Stay curious and keep exploring.